The Hidden Prophecy of Cayce About Souls. Reborn in the End Times. There is a secret written in the oldest records of consciousness, a prophecy that Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, whispered only when his voice came from somewhere beyond the veil. He spoke of you, not the you that wakes each morning to an alarm clock, but the ancient you. The soul that has walked this earth before, that remembers the fall of civilizations, that carries in its spiritual DNA the blueprint of worlds that rose and fell before history learned to write their names. If you have ever felt like you arrived here at the wrong time, if the modern world feels like a costume that doesn't quite fit, if you carry a homesickness for a place that exists on no map and in no photograph, then what I am about to share may explain the ache you have carried since childhood. Cayce's readings, preserved in thousands of documented cases at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, speak of a gathering, a convergence of old souls, battle-tested and world-weary, who chose to incarnate now, not later when the dust has settled, not earlier when there was still time to prevent what is coming, but now, in the exact center of the storm. You were not sent here as punishment. You volunteered. Before you were born, when you still remembered who you truly were, you looked at this moment in human history and said yes. You saw the chaos that was coming, the collapse of systems, the shattering of illusions, the dissolution of everything humanity thought was permanent, and you chose to be present for it. Because you have done this before. Because somewhere in the Akashic Records of your soul's journey, there is a chapter about the last time the world ended, and this time you came back to get it right. Edgar Cayce did not speak lightly about the soul's journey through time. Over the course of 43 years, in a state of self-induced trance that physicians could not explain, he gave over 14,000 readings. He traced individual souls across lifetimes, from ancient Egypt to Rome, from Atlantis to colonial America, mapping the karma, the lessons, the unfinished business that pulls consciousness back into form again and again. But only in certain readings, preserved now in the ARE archives, did his voice change. It became urgent, almost pleading. He described what he called the Great Return, a wave of advanced souls who would incarnate en masse during the closing years of a grand cycle. These were not random reincarnations. They were strategic placements. Souls who had reached high levels of spiritual development, who had earned the right to rest in higher dimensions, were choosing to come back into the density of physical form during humanity's darkest hour. Why would anyone make such a choice? Cayce was clear. These souls carried something the world would desperately need. They had witnessed the end of ages before. They knew how to navigate collapse without losing their center. They understood that destruction is not the enemy of creation. It is the requirement. The old must fully die before the new can breathe. And these returning souls, scarred by the memory of Atlantis's final days, were coming back to ensure that this time humanity would not destroy itself in the transition. They would be the midwives of the new world. This was not prophecy as entertainment. This was a recognition signal sent across time, meant to awaken those who carry this ancient contract in their bones. Not every soul alive today is part of this prophesied wave. The earth currently hosts billions of incarnations at wildly different stages of development. Young souls here to learn basic lessons of compassion, intermediate souls refining their understanding of karma, and then, scattered among them like undercover agents, the ancient ones. How do you recognize them? Cayce provided markers. The first is early awareness. Children who ask questions about death, God, or the nature of reality before they can tie their shoes. Teenagers who feel existentially exhausted, as if they have already lived 1,000 lives and are tired before their adulthood even begins. This is not depression, though it may be diagnosed as such. It is the soul's memory pressing against the veil of forgetting, trying to remind the conscious mind, we have been here before. The second marker is profound alienation from surface-level existence. If you have ever sat in a room full of people, discussing trivial matters and felt a scream building in your chest, not from judgment, but from a bone-deep knowing that time is running out, and these conversations are a luxury the world can no longer afford, then you know this feeling. Ancient souls cannot settle into comfort. They are allergic to distraction. Something in them remains vigilant, scanning the horizon, waiting for the moment they were trained to recognize. The third marker is magnetism toward the hidden. You were the child who found books on reincarnation, energy healing, or ancient civilizations without anyone guiding you there. You experienced phenomena, precognitive dreams, spontaneous past life recall, the ability to sense others' emotions as if they were your own, that your family had no framework to understand. And rather than dismiss these experiences, you tucked them away, guarding them like seeds, knowing that one day you would need to plant them. But perhaps the clearest sign is the exhaustion, not the tiredness that comes from overwork, but a weariness that seems to originate from somewhere deeper than this lifetime. You are tired in a way that sleep cannot fix, because you are not just tired from this life. You are tired from all of them, from every battlefield, every fall of empire, every moment you held someone dying and promised you would find them again. The ancient soul does not arrive here rested. It arrives already carrying the weight of worlds. To understand why you are here, now you must first understand what now means in the language of cosmic cycles. Cayce spoke often of the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year wobble in Earth's axis that marks the grand seasons of human consciousness. We are currently in the final degrees of one such cycle, moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. This is not astrology as pop culture understands it. This is astronomy wed to metaphysics, describing how the orientation of Earth itself shapes the available frequencies of consciousness. When a cycle closes, everything that was built during that cycle must be evaluated. Structures that served growth are honored and released. Structures that became corrupt, that prioritized control over compassion, power over wisdom, these must collapse. And they do not go quietly. The end of an age is always chaotic, always painful, always marked by the death throes of institutions that believed themselves eternal. Cayce saw this clearly. He foresaw earth changes, economic upheaval, the dissolution of governments, and the shattering of religious and scientific paradigms that had calcified into dogma. But he also saw something more important. He saw who would be here to navigate it. In one reading, he described these returning souls as those who have known the darkness and learned to carry light within it. They were present during the fall of Atlantis, not as bystanders but as active participants in the karmic drama that led to its destruction. Some were among the elite, the sons of Belial, who chose technological power over spiritual law and paid the ultimate price. They return now to choose differently. Others were the victims, the oppressed, the silenced, and they return now to reclaim their sovereignty and ensure the same mistakes are not repeated. Still others were the ones who saw the disaster coming, tried to warn their people, and were ignored. They return now to be the seers who are finally heard. The mission is not to prevent the collapse. The collapse is necessary. The mission is to be present during it, holding a frequency of calm remembrance and unshakable faith that what dies is only the form, never the essence. You are here to remind humanity that endings are not failures, they are thresholds. And you know this not because you read it, but because you have crossed them before. The ancient souls do not arrive as a uniform army. They come as a spectrum of gifts, each essential to the whole. Cayce's readings revealed 5 primary archetypes: though many souls carry more than one. First, the seers. These are the ones who perceive patterns before they manifest, who read the invisible currents of collective consciousness and know what is coming. They are the prophets, the intuitives, the ones who wake from dreams with warnings or visions they cannot always explain but know they must share. In practical terms, they are often drawn to astrology, tarot, energy medicine, or any system that decodes the unseen. Their challenge is learning when to speak and when to stay silent, for not all warnings are meant for all ears. Second, the healers. These souls came back to mend what is broken, not just in bodies but in relationships, systems, and the collective psyche. They are the therapists, the energy workers, the nurses and caregivers who seem to have endless capacity to hold others' pain. But their deeper work is healing trauma that spans lifetimes, releasing karmic patterns that have kept entire lineages bound in cycles of suffering. Cayce himself operated as this archetype, using his readings to identify the soul-level origins of physical disease and relational discord. Third, the architects. These are the visionaries who see not just what is dying, but what needs to be built in its place. They are drawn to permaculture, alternative economies, decentralized governance, sacred geometry, and technologies that honor rather than exploit the earth. They carry blueprints from Atlantis before its fall, from Lemuria, from civilizations that achieved balance between material and spiritual advancement. Their mission is to ensure that the new world is not just a reaction against the old, but a deliberate design rooted in spiritual law. Fourth, the warriors of truth. Do not mistake this for violence. These souls came to dismantle lies, personal, cultural, systemic. They are the whistleblowers, the investigative journalists, the ones who cannot stay silent when they witness injustice. They protect the vulnerable, expose corruption, and refuse to participate in systems built on deception. Their weapon is transparency, and their battlefield is consciousness itself. Cayce warned that these souls would face the most resistance, for they threaten the comfort of collective denial. Fifth, the anchors. These are perhaps the quietest, but no less vital. They are the ones who embody stability, who hold frequency steady when everyone around them is fragmenting into fear or rage. They do not need large platforms or public recognition. Their work is energetic. They are the calm centers in the storm, the safe harbors where others can rest and remember who they are. Often they are mothers, teachers, gardeners, or artists, anyone whose presence alone seems to lower the temperature of chaos in a room. You may recognize yourself clearly in one archetype, or you may find that you have been several across different chapters of your life. Trust this, the mission is vast and your soul knows which role to play at which moment. The key is to stop apologizing for being different, stop trying to fit into boxes designed for younger, less complex consciousnesses. You are not broken. You are precisely calibrated for the task you came to do. If you are one of these ancient souls, I do not need to tell you that your life has been difficult. You already know. What you may not know is why. Why the chronic illness that no doctor can fully explain. Why the family that could not see you, the relationships that fractured despite your best efforts, the financial struggle that seems disproportionate to your intelligence and work ethic. Why does the path feel so relentlessly hard? Cayce answered this with brutal honesty. Accelerated karma. The souls returning now carry unfinished business from multiple lifetimes, and they agreed, before birth, when they still had access to their soul's full knowing, to compress that karma into a single incarnation. Not as punishment, but as preparation. You cannot serve as a clear channel for light if you are still entangled in unresolved patterns. So the soul chooses the hardest curriculum, the most challenging family, the sharpest initiations, because it knows it is strong enough. and because it knows that time is short. In one documented case from the ARE archives, a woman came to Cayce suffering from debilitating anxiety and nightmares that had plagued her since childhood. In trance, Cayce traced her soul back to Atlantis, where she had been a priestess, who stayed silent when she should have spoken, who saw the corruption of the ruling class, knew the destruction it would cause, and said nothing out of fear. She returned now carrying that karmic weight, manifesting as a paralyzing inability to speak her truth in this lifetime. Once she understood the origin, the healing could begin. But first, she had to endure the trial that would force her to confront what she had avoided across millennia. This is the pattern. The ancient souls are not given easy lives because they are not here to coast. They are here to burn through residue, to transmute old pain into present wisdom, to embody the integration of shadow and light so they can guide others through the same process. But there is another layer. These souls are also targeted. Lower frequency entities, systems of control, and even other humans threatened by awakening consciousness. They sense the light and instinctively move to extinguish it. This is not paranoia. This is documented in Cayce's readings about psychic attack, energy vampirism, and the importance of spiritual protection. If your life has felt like a gauntlet, if you have been tested again and again in ways that seem unfair, understand this. It is evidence of your importance, not your failure. The universe does not waste initiations on souls that will not use them. Cayce did not leave the returnees defenseless against the forces that seek to derail the mission. His readings are filled with practical, precise instructions for maintaining spiritual integrity in a world designed to distract, fragment, and drain. The first layer of protection is daily attunement. This is non-negotiable. Every morning before the noise of the world intrudes, the soul must reconnect with its source. Cayce called this setting the ideal, a conscious act of aligning your will with divine will, your personal agenda with the highest good. For some, this is prayer. For others, meditation. For many, it is simply sitting in silence with one hand on the heart, breathing and remembering, I am not this body, not this story, not this struggle. I am an eternal being temporarily walking in density. The second layer is discernment about what you allow into your field. Cayce was explicit. Lower vibrations create openings. Alcohol, drugs, excessive media consumption, toxic relationships, environments that feel heavy or oppressive. These are not neutral. They lower your frequency and make you vulnerable to attachment, whether from lower astral entities or simply the collective fear consciousness that swirls around humanity like smog. This does not mean you must live as a monk on a mountain. It means you must become ruthlessly honest about what depletes you versus what replenishes you, and then have the courage to choose accordingly. The third layer is surrounding yourself with high-frequency inputs. Cayce often prescribed music, specifically sacred music, nature sounds, or harmonics that align the chakras. He recommended spending time in nature, particularly near water, where the electromagnetic field of the earth can recalibrate your own. He spoke of the power of beauty, art, poetry, architecture designed with sacred geometry. These are not luxuries, they are medicine. When the world feels unbearable, when the mission feels too large, when doubt whispers that you are not enough, these frequencies remind the soul of what it already knows. You are held by something infinitely larger than the chaos. And the fourth layer, perhaps the most important, is community. Not large groups, not public platforms, but small circles of fellow travelers who recognize each other without needing to explain. Souls who can mirror back your mission when you forget, who can say, I see you, I know what you carry, and you are not alone. Cayce warned that isolation is one of the primary weapons used against the returnees. You are meant to find each other. When you do, protect those connections fiercely. There comes a moment when the veil suddenly thins, and everything you thought you understood about reality shifts. Cayce called these soul activations, moments when the higher self breaks through the amnesia of incarnation and floods the conscious mind with remembrance. For some, it happens during a crisis, a near-death experience, the loss of someone beloved, a health collapse that forces you to stop and question everything. In that breaking open, something ancient stirs. You know things you were never taught. You see patterns you never studied. Dreams become vivid, cinematic, instructional, full of symbols, guides, and messages that feel like transmissions from a part of yourself that never forgot who you are. For others, the activation is quieter but no less powerful. Synchronicities multiply. You think of someone and they call within the hour. You need an answer and a book falls off a shelf, opening to the exact passage. Numbers appear, 1111, 333, sequences that catch your eye again and again until you can no longer dismiss them as coincidence. These are the soul's breadcrumbs, leading you back to the mission you agreed to before you were born. In one case, preserved in Cayce's files, a man reported that after years of feeling numb and disconnected, he suddenly began experiencing spontaneous visions during meditation, flashes of himself in ancient Egypt, working with sound and frequency to heal. He had no prior interest in Egyptology, no framework for what he was seeing. But the visions were so visceral, so detailed, that he could not ignore them. When he finally sought out a reading, Cayce confirmed he had been a priest-scientist in a temple dedicated to vibrational healing, and he was being called to remember that knowledge now, because the world would soon need it again. This is the pattern of activation. The soul does not ask permission. When the time is right, when the planetary alignments, your personal astrology, and your karmic readiness converge, it simply wakes you up. And once you are awake, you cannot go back to sleep. You can only decide how consciously you will walk forward. If you are feeling this now, if reality suddenly feels less solid, if you are being pulled toward knowledge, practices, or people that make no logical sense but feel utterly necessary, know this: you are not losing your mind. You are finding your soul. And the urgency you feel is not anxiety. It is the mission coming online. Cayce's prophecies were never about instilling fear. They were about preparation. He foresaw earth changes, shifting coastlines, increased seismic activity, climate disruption, not as divine punishment, but as the natural consequence of a planet responding to the consciousness of its inhabitants. He saw economic collapse, the dissolution of governments that had become corrupt beyond repair, and the shattering of religious and scientific institutions that had forgotten they were meant to serve humanity, not control it. But he also saw something crucial. These were not endpoints. They were labor pains. The old world must contract fully, must squeeze out every ounce of what no longer serves, before the new can crown and take its first breath. He described a period of approximately 20 to 30 years of intensified chaos, followed by the gradual emergence of a new civilization, one built not on domination, extraction, and separation, but on unity consciousness, spiritual law, and reverence for the living earth. By Cayce's timeline and the signs unfolding around us, we are in the deepest part of the contraction now. You can feel it, can't you? The old systems thrashing, doubling down on control, even as they fracture from within. The collective oscillating between awakening and denial, hope and terror, sometimes within the span of a single news cycle. This is not a sign that something has gone wrong. This is exactly what the ancient souls were trained to navigate. In one reading, Cayce was asked how long the turmoil would last. His answer was both sobering and hopeful. as long as humanity requires to remember what it has forgotten. There is no fixed date. The timeline is fluid, shaped by collective consciousness. But he was clear that the souls incarnating now, the ones reading these words, the ones who feel ancient and exhausted and strangely prepared, are here because the window for intervention is closing, not to force change, but to hold space for it, not to save everyone, but to be the steady ones who do not lose their center when everything else is falling apart. This is not doom prophecy. This is context. You are not witnessing the end of the world. You are witnessing the end of a world, one particular arrangement of power, belief, and priority that had its time and is now complete. And what comes next depends in part on whether the ancient souls remember who they are and why they came. Cayce's vision of the post-transition world was not vague utopianism. It was specific, practical, almost architectural in its detail. He described decentralized communities living in harmony with natural cycles, societies that understood food as medicine, that built with sacred geometry, that organized governance around service rather than dominance. He spoke of technologies that would emerge once humanity learned to blend spiritual wisdom with material innovation, the way Atlantis had done before its fall, but this time without the hubris. He saw healing modalities that integrated body, mind, and soul as inseparable dimensions of the same being. Medicine that did not just suppress symptoms, but addressed root causes spanning multiple lifetimes. Education that nurtured intuition alongside intellect, teaching children not what to think, but how to access their own inner knowing. Economies based on reciprocity rather than extraction, where wealth was measured not in accumulation, but in how much you contributed to the thriving of the whole. This is the blueprint the ancient souls carry in their spiritual DNA. You have seen this before, not in fantasy, but in memory. Atlantis before it fell, Lemuria in its highest expression, civilizations that have been dismissed as myth, but live on in the Akashic Records, accessible to those who know how to read them. Your mission is not just to survive the collapse. It is to be an architect of what rises from the ruins. What are you being called to build? Is it a new model of education, pulled from the memory of temple schools where science and spirituality were taught as one? Is it a healing practice that your hands seem to know without formal training because you used it in a prior incarnation? Is it a way of organizing community that feels ancient and yet perfectly suited to the needs of a world that has grown weary of isolation? The work does not require you to have all the answers. It requires only that you trust the pull, honor the vision, and begin. Even if you are the only one in your town, your family, your circle who sees it. Even if it feels impossibly small. The new world is not built by governments or institutions. It is built by souls like you, one quiet act of integrity at a time, until the field shifts and what was once impossible becomes inevitable. One of the deepest pains the ancient souls endure is not the external chaos, but the internal loneliness. You look around and see people you love, parents, partners, friends, children, and they are still asleep. They move through the world as if the old structures are permanent, as if the surface explanations hold, as if there is nothing beneath the visible that requires attention, and you cannot force them awake. You have tried. You have shared articles, recommended books, attempted to explain what you see, and been met with dismissal, mockery, or worse, concern that you are losing your grip on reality. This is agony, to see the cliff edge approaching and watch those you love walk toward it, humming, distracted, convinced they have time. Cayce taught that this gap is not accidental. It is karmic, but it is also temporary. Souls incarnate in waves, and not everyone is meant to awaken on the same timeline. Some will wake in the middle of the storm, when the collapse is undeniable. Others will wake in the aftermath when the new world is already emerging. And still others will not wake in this lifetime. They will leave their bodies and remember on the other side, then choose whether to return for the next phase. Your mission is not to pry open their eyes. It is to embody the frequency that makes awakening possible. To live as a walking demonstration that there is another way, calmer, clearer, rooted in something the chaos cannot touch. Some will notice. Some will eventually ask what you know that they don't. And when they do, you will be ready to meet them without judgment, because you remember how terrifying it was when you first woke. But for those who never ask, for those who choose to stay asleep, Cayce offered this. Love them anyway, not by enabling their denial, not by pretending you don't see what you see, but by honoring their free will as sacred. You are not here to save anyone. You are here to hold frequency. And sometimes the most radical act of compassion is to let others walk their own path, even when it breaks your heart to watch. This does not mean abandoning boundaries. If a relationship drains you, if someone's unconsciousness pulls you down, you are allowed to step back, to protect your energy, to choose your own mission over their comfort. Love does not require martyrdom. It requires clarity, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone still asleep is to let them go, trusting that their soul has its own plan, its own timing, its own awakening waiting in the wings. There is a reason Cayce returned again and again to Atlantis in his readings. It was not nostalgia, it was necessity. He saw, with painful clarity, that many of the souls, incarnating now, carried unresolved karma from that final, catastrophic chapter. Atlantis fell not because of a single disaster, but because of a choice, a collective choice to prioritize power over wisdom, technology over spiritual law, ego over unity. The ruling class, known in Cayce's readings as the Sons of Belial, became so enamored with their own abilities, so convinced of their superiority, that they ignored the warnings of those who could still see the consequences of their actions. They manipulated genetics, weaponized crystals, enslaved entire populations, and when the Earth finally responded to the imbalance they had created, it swallowed them whole. If you feel a strange weight around technology, if you are simultaneously drawn to and terrified of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, or any system that gives humans godlike power without godlike wisdom, this may be why. Your soul remembers. It remembers what happens when a civilization becomes so sophisticated in its manipulation of matter that it forgets matter is sacred. Some of the souls returning now were among the elite. They made the wrong choice then, and they carry the unbearable memory of having contributed to the destruction of an entire world. They return now not to be punished, but to choose differently, to use their gifts for creation rather than domination, to serve rather than rule. This is not easy karma. The temptation to repeat the pattern is immense, because the pattern is engraved deep. But the soul chose to face it again because this time it believes it can pass the test. Others were victims. They were the enslaved, the silenced, the ones whose warnings were ignored. They return now to reclaim sovereignty, to finally speak, to ensure that this time the voices of the marginalized are heard before it is too late. Their karmic work is not guilt, it is empowerment. It is stepping into the authority they were denied in that prior lifetime and using it to protect what is sacred. And still others were the ones who saw the disaster coming and did nothing, not because they agreed with the Sons of Belial, but because they were afraid or tired or convinced that one person could not make a difference. These souls carry perhaps the most subtle karma, the weight of inaction. They return now with a burning urgency, an inability to stay silent, a compulsion to act even when the outcome is uncertain. They are here to prove to themselves that this time they will not look away. The prophecy is not just about collective transformation. It is about personal redemption, the chance to rewrite an ending that haunts the soul across millennia. If you feel this weight, if you recognize yourself in any of these patterns, know that the healing begins with acknowledgement. You were there, you played a role, and now you are back to complete what was left unfinished. If you are still here, still listening, and feeling the enormity of what has been shared, I want you to know something that Cayce understood with perfect clarity. You are afraid you will fail again. That fear is a constant hum beneath your awareness, shaping decisions you think are about the present but are actually about the past. You doubt yourself not because you are inadequate, but because you remember a time when your best was not enough to prevent catastrophe. This fear is sacred. It keeps you humble. It keeps you vigilant. It ensures you will not repeat the arrogance that felled Atlantis, the certainty that you alone held the answers and everyone else was blind. Your doubt is proof of your growth, evidence that your soul learned from what happened before and refuses to carry the same blindness forward. But here is what you must also understand. You cannot fail, not in the way you fear. Failure would have been not showing up at all. It would have been remaining in the higher dimensions, safe and comfortable, while the world you once loved burned itself to ash. But you are here. You chose to incarnate during the hardest transition humanity has ever faced. You agreed to carry the weight, to endure the trials, to hold steady when everything around you is collapsing. The mission does not require perfection. It requires presence. It does not demand that you single-handedly shift the consciousness of the planet, heal every broken system, or save every sleeping soul. It asks only that you hold your frequency, that you do your part, whatever your part is, without needing to see the full outcome. The ancient souls are not here as saviors. They are here as threads in a tapestry so vast that no single thread can comprehend the pattern it is helping to weave. In one of his most tender readings, Cayce spoke to a soul crippled by guilt over past life choices that had contributed to suffering. He said this, "The soul grows not from avoiding mistakes, but from choosing again with greater wisdom. You are here now. That is enough. You are enough. Your being here, in this body, in this moment, reading these words, this is already shifting the field. You do not have to earn the right to be part of the gathering. You already are. The mission is not something you must achieve. It is something you are living, breath by breath, choice by choice, whether you feel it or not. So rest when you need to. Grieve when the weight feels too much. Doubt when doubt arises. These are not signs of failure. They are signs of your humanity, and your humanity is part of the gift. The ancient souls did not return as perfect beings. They returned as beautifully flawed humans who know what it is to suffer, to question, to break, and who also know that the soul cannot be destroyed, no matter how many times the world ends. You cannot unknow what you now know. The prophecy has been spoken, and something in you recognizes it. Not because I convinced you, but because it resonated with a knowing you have carried since before you could name it. You are one of the ancient souls. You are part of the gathering, and whether you step into that identity fully or move through your life quietly holding your light, you are already contributing to the mission. The choice before you is not whether to join. You already have, simply by being born into this era. The choice is how consciously you walk the path. Will you honor the trials as initiation rather than curse them as punishment? Will you protect your energy with the same vigilance you would guard a sacred flame in a hurricane? Will you build even when the old world mocks the foundation you lay? Will you love even when those you love cannot see what you see? This is the invitation Cayce extended in every reading where he spoke of the end times souls. To live as one who remembers, to stop pretending you are ordinary, to stop apologizing for being different, to stop shrinking your knowing to fit into spaces designed for those who have not walked as far as you. You are here for a reason. The universe does not make mistakes of this magnitude, and the world, though it may not consciously recognize you yet, is already responding to your presence. Every time you choose truth over comfort, every time you hold steady when others are fragmenting, every time you create beauty or offer healing or speak what needs to be spoken, you are fulfilling the contract you signed before you were born. The new world is not coming. It is being born right now through choices like yours, through the father who teaches his children to question authority with respect, through the nurse who sees patients as souls, not symptoms, through the artist who paints the vision of what could be, through the gardener who tends the earth as if it were holy, through the person sitting alone at night, hands on heart, breathing through fear and choosing to stay open rather than shut down. You are that person. And tonight, before you sleep, I invite you to whisper this to yourself. I remember, I am here, I will not turn away. Say it even if you don't fully believe it yet. Say it as a promise to the part of you that chose this, because the soul already knows what the mind is still learning. You are enough. You are here on purpose, and the gathering is complete because you showed up. If these words found you, it was not random. If they stirred something you cannot quite name, woke a memory you thought you had forgotten, or simply made you feel less alone, then you are part of the web. And the web is how the ancient souls find each other. Subscribe if you want to continue this journey together. There are more of Cayce's hidden teachings to explore. Prophecies about the mechanics of dimensional shift, the role of dreams in soul preparation, the specific practices he recommended for navigating the borderlands between worlds. Share this with someone who might need to hear it, not to evangelize, but to extend a hand to another traveler who may be walking the path in silence, thinking they are the only one. And tonight, before sleep takes you, place one hand on your heart. Feel the steady rhythm beneath your palm. That heartbeat connects you to every soul that has ever lived, every consciousness that has ever chosen incarnation, every being that looked at the storm and said, yes, you are not alone. You have never been alone. The gathering is real and you are part of it. The world does not yet know what you are, but your soul does. And in the end, that is the only knowing that matters. Rest now, Ancient One. Tomorrow the work continues.